Hello, I'm Zachary Newell. Do you ever feel like humanity deserves a better world than the one we've built for ourselves? Personally, I just can't shake the feeling. That's why I'm here, to talk about what we've been doing and how we can do it better.
Welcome to Better Futures.
All right. Hello, my friend Edgar. How are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. One thing that I've been focusing on a lot lately has just been the degree to which our reality is being poisoned by social media at this juncture.
Yeah.
That was what I had brought up to you first because you had said something very interesting that had to do with how much we can communicate as a society nowadays, and
Mhm.
yet the decreasing amount of sense we make because of that communication. So I
Mhm.
was wondering, do you have any thoughts on that as far as you can lead us?
Whenever I think of social media, it's a really not just shocking, but a really monstrous thing, right? Because it's like the result of millions of people interacting with one another in a certain space, but not a physical space. And I don't like this kind of words, but like an intersubjective space, right?
Sure.
So it's a space created from the interaction with people, but it has a will of its own, right? So it's monstrous because you don't really know how it's going to react, and no one can control it, right? Although it's created by individuals, no individual can control any aspect of that collective thing, which is social media, right? Like, of course, there are, for example, rich people which control lots of important social media transmissions or transmitters, right? But still, there are things that not even they can control, right? Like, for example, that's what explains why brands are so interested in influencers, right? Like influencers are people who, for some reason, become famous, like for some casual reason, and they mount on that fame to promote their brands, right? But there's still this an uncontrollable element to it, right? And still, I mean, we all know how much influence it has over all of us, right? And over the way, yeah, we understand reality. But I don't know. I remember one thing we were discussing the last time you came, when you stayed with us. Um, we talked about Star Wars, right? And how everybody was so mad with the new storyline. It's interesting because you really can ask, like, who is supposed to own a story, right? A story like that. How can you claim ownership on a story? Of course, legally you can, right? But like that kind of story has like a collective character, and it's weird how people want it to go one way, a certain way. A group of people want it to go a certain way, the story, but it goes in another way, and who could really legitimately decide where the story is supposed to go, right? uh I guess no one has that right, right? But legally Disney does. Of course.
I'm curious. I want to follow the analogy a little further. I'm guessing that the comparison would be Star Wars fans who were unhappy about the direction of the new story.
Mhm.
Would those people be the typical social media users unhappy with the story being told through the discourse in this intersubjective space?
I guess the analogy is just to point out that things like this kind of stories are controlled, maybe by some people with the power to control it publicly. But still, it's not easy to say. I think I got lost in the analogy, actually. But well, I mean, my point about social media is just that I think it's really for me it's frightening, that element not being something we really understand how it works, although it's in the hands of some people, certain aspects of it, some are not. And it does have a lot of consequences, right? All the different voices and visions of the world that are colliding in social media. It's just impossible to have a criteria for identifying which vision is more reasonable under any criteria. And it's not possible to make sense of all the different ways of seeing the world you can find there. But of course, you could ask, why would you look for a certain vision of the world in social media, right? But I don't know, maybe because that's the main source of information we have from your own country and from other parts of the world. Maybe that's why we would like to know how trustworthy it is. But yeah, I don't like social media, but I can't help using it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you and I, although we are friends in reality or when
Mhm,
we're side by side, we do most of our interactions on social media. So
mhm.
it is unavoidable to some degree, or at least the way I've been living my life so far. I have not been avoiding.
Yeah. Yeah. I only know very few people who don't have Facebook. My brother, for example, has no Facebook. I think the last social media he had was High Five or something like that.
Wow, way back. I'm curious what you had to say earlier about criteria for judging vision of the world that are available on social media.
Yeah, it's like really confusing, right? I mean, when you really when you're not trying just to impose your view of things, or when you're really trying to find out how things really are, it's really hard to do it, because when you discuss with people on social media, for example, the main subject I've been reading about and finding on social media is the situation of bicycle riders here in Mexico City, because there have been so many accidents in the last years because there are much more cyclists than before. So all the it's really, I mean, I laugh now, but when I read that, I get really mad, because in Twitter, for example, you can just see how many people who drive cars are just annoyed because of the presence or existence of bicycles on the road. What the hell are they doing? Why don't they buy a car and move the economy, right? Those are the arguments, of course, really stupid. But you do see, and they say things like bicycle riders shouldn't go the opposite way of the street, and they shouldn't go on the sidewalks, and things that are, of course, reasonable, right? But when you are a bicycle rider and they say that to you, you think, yeah, and that's not the point, really. That's not the problem, right? But they think bicycle riders don't have a license and they don't get tickets for speeding, for example. And cars do. They think the problem is bicycle riders don't wear helmets always, and no one says anything. No one writes them a ticket. Of course, we as bicycle riders think that's just stupid, because even if you have a helmet, if some fucking drunk runs the light, he will kill you whether you have a helmet or not.